back to Proverbs 9. I'm pretty sure Proverbs is still in my Bible. Hold on. All right. So before we start, I want to give you guys a picture of what's going on. A couple weeks ago, we talked about this diptych. It was two like sides, almost like sides of a book that you see two different pictures on. We see woman wisdom, and today she's called woman folly. We see woman wisdom and woman folly. Now, I want you guys to imagine for what's happening here, in that this gal is building a house in a sense. Have any of you ever built your own house?
A birdhouse.
Actually, Steve's not here. He left. But anyway, and kind of the Dentons kind of had a lot of that going on. But imagine the craftsmanship. Imagine the time it takes to build, and it's your own home. So imagine, you're going to do it, right. You're going to really take care and a lot of skill. And so that's kind of what the woman is doing today. That's kind of what's happening. And also, she's giving a feast. And just to give you guys an idea of kind of what this feast has to do with it. So back in ancient days, in fact, back in about the time that Solomon was writing, there was a king of Assyria, and his name was Ashurnasirpal, I don't know. He was the king of Assyria, very brutal, very cruel king, but the idea was in those days that you would give banquets and feasts at appropriate times that were worthy of you. Well, however great you were, that's how great your banquet would be. And this is just one of those interesting little things in history. But it says, so less than 50 years after Solomon died, this very ruthless and cruel king came to power. He built his royal city just north of Baghdad, because again, he was the king of Assyria. And he built this monumental palace, presumably in order to show his greatness. He had a royal feast, because the historians are like, he didn't even need to do this. This guy was so cruel. The Assyrians were known for their deep cruelty, their ruthlessness. Everybody was already afraid of him, so they don't really know why, except that maybe he was just showing, this is how great I am. He throws a feast, and it was a 10-day feast, and this is really funny to me. 69,574 people came to his feast. So they ate and drank, and I imagine they made merry, as you can think of a feast. And they actually have well, I don't know, kind of like a menu from his feast. So his
kind
feast.
Of the Super Bowl of feasting.
Yeah, the Super Bowl of feasting, exactly. So the banquet records show that the celebration included, but was not limited to, 1,000 oxen, 1,000 domestic cattle and sheep, 14 imported and fattened sheep. That's funny. Domestic. So you have 1,000 domestic, but 14,000 imported and fattened sheep. 1,000 lambs, 500 game birds, 500 gazelles, 10,000 fish, 10,000 eggs, 10,000 loaves of bread, 10,000 measures of beer, and and I don't know how much a measure is. I was trying to look that up, but that must have been a fun party. So 10,000 containers of wine, and they had other things like spices, and then they had sesame seeds, grains, grapes, onions, garlic, honey, mustard, milk, nuts, cheese, olives, dates, ghee, and turnips. It was almost like the baby shower yesterday, almost like that good. So that just gives you an idea. So the woman that we're going to read about here, she is setting out a feast, okay? She's woman wisdom. So when you think about wisdom being equated to God, and then of course later to Jesus Christ, you can imagine that God's wisdom is so great. It's like this king giving this great feast. How many people will I feed? And I'm going to feed you well. Okay, so that's kind of the picture. And then, so we talk about woman wisdom building her house and giving this feast. And then there's a strange little interlude in 9, which seems to break up the passage. Because at the end of the passage now we have woman folly building her house. Okay, and so we're contrasting the two with this little interlude in the middle about wisdom. Okay, so let's just read. I'm just going to read the first 6 verses, and then we'll talk about those. This says, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat, and she mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her maids, and she calls from the highest point of the city. Let all who are simple come in here. And she says to those who lack judgment, come, eat my food, drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of understanding. One thing I think we need to remember is that we're using an extended metaphor here. And a metaphor is, as you guys know, it takes two things that aren't really alike, and it's comparing them. Okay, so this woman wisdom is, we see in our mind a woman, but she's like the wisdom of God. Okay, so this, and the extended metaphor, this is like a super extended metaphor. It's not just a metaphor through the entire chapter 9, it's a metaphor across the intro of Proverbs here. Okay, we keep running into this woman wisdom and the metaphor here. So for example, just so you guys remember this metaphor thing, like if I say, you are the sun, you shine brightly, you shower us with warm rays, right? I'm talking about a person who's very kind and warm, but I'm comparing that person to the sun. And I want you to imagine this. Here's a poet, Langston Hughes, on life, and he writes this little thing, and he's comparing life to a staircase, two things that aren't really alike, but he compares them to a staircase, and it says, well, this is a mother talking, well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks on it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. And the only point I'm trying to make here is that when I read something like this, I'm imagining these stairs, and I'm imagining the splinters and the tacks, and I know what the author's saying, but sometimes I get lost in the metaphor itself and forget to remember what it was about. So we have to remember, we have to imagine this staircase in our mind, but the next step is we have to say, okay, we have to imagine the mother and her life. You know what I'm saying? So there's these things with the metaphor. I only put this in there because sometimes I get lost in the metaphor, and when we have an extended metaphor across the scripture, we just have to remember to take that last step and go, what is God saying? You know. So we have, that's just kind of I don't know, I guess a tip for reading. So as we read Proverbs 9, discipline yourself. Keep asking the question, what is the author trying to tell me? What's the author trying to tell me? Okay, don't just leave it with the mental image. Okay, so now imagine two beautiful women calling out to the youth, and it's really to everybody, but calling out to the youth and all the people of our society. And these two women occupy the most important places in the city. Okay, they're on top of the city walls, they're at the entrance gates of the city, they're at the crossroads, they're at the door of their own homes. Okay. Each of them urgently beckons everyone who passes by, and especially the young people, because they're at the most vulnerable time in their life. Especially, you know, we're talking about, you know, and that day it would have been a little younger, you know, they married a lot younger, but, you know, think high school, college age. In our society, that's when our kids are really making some important decisions that could affect them their entire life, right? They could be making good decisions or poor decisions that affect them their entire life. So imagine there's two women, two beautiful women calling them. Could be your kid, could be your grandkid, could be your friend. They're calling, they're both beckoning. They occupy these important places in our lives. And they're calling, and it says each of them urgently beckons, and they, if you guys remember, we talked about this last time, they're making an appeal to the uncommitted. That's why we so work hard here with our young children, right? We're trying to get them to be the committed, right? We're trying to get our children to a place when they get to that crossroads, they won't take the wrong path. Or if they do take the wrong path, that they will come back. You guys know a lot of Christians, kids who grow up in the church, they walk away for a while, and then a lot of times in their late 20s and early 30s, they come back to the values and to the things that they knew, you know. And if they do walk away, that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that we're building for them. So what happens here with the kids is extraordinarily important, even though we don't feel its import every time we teach them. But it builds this house that it's a house we're building. So. And so they come, they're appealing to the uncommitted, come and love me. Woman wisdom, come and love me. You can imagine that's kind of a beautiful thing, come and love me. But then you've got this woman folly, she's like, come and love me, right? Woman folly is appealing to the flesh, to all things that, whatever the flesh desires, come and love me, I'll give it to you. Woman wisdom, it says, come love me, I love your soul, right? So you've kind of got this beautiful picture, come love me, and this kind of ugly picture, come love me. And they're both beckoning. And the author wants to remind us that whatever we take will take us. whatever we take will take us. If you take woman wisdom, you know, she'll take you in. If you take woman folly, she'll take you in. Okay? So today's extended metaphor includes, of course, both of these women, and it showcases them. And as I said, woman wisdom is at her home in the first part, and she's preparing a great feast in line with the great feasts of her day. All right. So the original readers of this proverb, more than we probably understand it, would have understood this reference to the feast. Okay. So wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. And I want you to think about wisdom. I mean, I remember, if you guys remember, I wasn't around when Steve built his house, but I was around when the Dentons built their house, and that was quite a work, if you guys remember. I mean, they were like, ah. Anyway, although we were around when you guys put your new addition onto your house. I mean, that's a big job, but I want you to think about what the author's saying. When you build your own home, it is, I'm not sure I would want to try it, it's all-encompassing. Every room's important. Every wall, every floor, everything's important. And this is woman wisdom building, and it takes a long time, and you hope this building lasts. That's kind of what we're worried about with our church right now, right? We want to put stuff in that lasts. We want to put good effort in now so that it lasts. And so this is what wisdom is. So she has this long, arduous task, but it's a labor of love for woman wisdom. One thing we got to remember about woman folly, it is not a labor of love, although it looks like a labor of love. But woman wisdom it's a labor of love. And so when God speaks to us and sometimes disciplines us, it's a labor of love. He's building a house. And you know, every metaphor breaks down, but you could say each one of us is his house. He's building in love, each one of our children. But our church is also a labor of love. He's building us into a community. And this is a continual task. It continues going for people who have wisdom. All right. The fact that she's hewn her 7 pillars, you know, she's doing this with her own hands. She's very skilled. She's doing a loving work. And 7 pillars really just indicates that back in that day, if you had a house with 7 pillars, it was extensive. It was massive. It was a place for many, many people to come. So this is just an indication that wisdom is building a large house. This reminds me, sometimes I like to connect stuff in the Bible, but does this remind you of a scripture? It reminded me of one about it's a big house with many rooms. It's like John 14, I don't know if you guys remember this, but do not let your hearts be troubled. This is Jesus talking. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come back. I'll take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. So there is this beautiful picture of Jesus, this big pillared house, you know, come. So woman wisdom, she has slaughtered her beasts, and she has mixed her wine, and she has set her table. And this is just a funny little note about wine. Wine is associated with very good things in the Bible. It's a time of, I mean, obviously there's some references of people getting drunk with any kind of alcohol, but wine is generally associated with good things, times of celebration, times of plenty. And there was an interesting note in the commentary because it says she mixed her wine. And the commentator goes, now, don't think she's mixing it with water to water it down. That is not what's happening. And he's like, in fact, Isaiah 1:22, he lists, and I went back and read it, but he lists watering down wine as something the unrighteous do, to sneak in a bad wine to people. So I thought that was a funny note. No, you know, he's serving the good stuff. And, you know, again, that makes me think about Jesus and his first miracle in the book of John, right? He makes this wine. All the wine runs out, and the guy's going to be shamed. The host of the marriage party is going to be shamed, and you know, Jesus' mother's like, I can just see us going, do something, and Jesus is like, it's not even my time yet, I'm not even supposed to do anything, and he makes this wine, and it's better than the first wine, so I just thought this was funny, and he goes, the commentator says, she's not mixing this with water, she's mixing it with honey or spices to make it more enjoyable, okay, And so again, the wine reminds us of plenty, and it reminds us of celebration. This is wisdom. When a child comes back to us after maybe going away, and they come back and they live in wisdom, it's a great celebration. It's a great joy to us, right? And then she sets the table again. This is really interesting. She sets a table which says is like normal. Usually we set a table when we eat or something like that, unless we're eating in front of the TV. But they said in common homes there weren't really tables. They don't think a table is something for the wealthy. You don't set a table in your common home because there's not one. So again, think about wisdom being this the most benevolent, wealthy person you've ever met, right? So the setting of table taps also into the value, the Jewish value of hospitality. Okay. Again, I don't know what it was about this. I kept referring back to other scripture about setting the table. You guys know the 23rd Psalm. It's really beautiful. I guess we could repeat it here. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd." This is a different version, so bear with me on this one. "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your rod and staff comfort me." And then it says here, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So you can really see this. You set a table before me. That would be unusual in that day. That would be the sign of somebody wealthy doing something for you, something wonderful. Okay? So here's what she's doing in verse 9. Then in verse 3 it says, "She has sent out to her young women to call from the highest places in the town." And this is really, in an allegorical sense, the author's using these things that woman wisdom is doing to point to what God has done. And he believes that these women, which is kind of funny, because they have to be women, because she's a woman, so she sends out her maidens, but they would represent what God has sent to the people, his sages, the wise men, the people, the elders, the people who knew. He's been sending them prophets. He's been sending them sages, and to help the people in their in calling them to wisdom. So that's kind of what this represents. So she's sent out her young women to call from the highest places on the town. And when you call from the highest place, everybody hears. Everybody is invited. Everybody. We have this idea of inclusivity, that when we read Luke, we get this idea. Jim and I had the opportunity on Friday to go to World Relief. They had called us. As you guys know, we've hosted a couple refugee families, and we've taught English over there. So they called us because they're feeling really down right now. Working with refugees right now is a difficult thing, and they asked us to come counsel, which would be Jim and pray. I can pray anyway. So we went there, and well, I don't know where I was going with that, you guys, but we're talking about everybody. Oh, I know where I was going. Exclusivity. So the woman wisdom's calling from the highest places, and one of the women that we talked to that day, she was the leader of the resettlement program, which is the main thing we do, and it was interesting to us because a couple of the women, we talked to 6 people. 2 of the women we talked to, and a couple of the other people, but one of their problems was that they feel like they very involved in these refugees' lives. They know these people. They know what they're like. They know who they are, but they talk to their own family and friends, and people don't understand, and they want to call out the truth. They want to call out to them wisdom, and it's really difficult for them. They want to go, "Come, look at my friends in the refugee community," and and the one lady said, "The thing about it is, Jesus was inclusive." And she goes, "You know what?" And this is a Christian organization, by the way, and this woman was, I would say, a devout Christian. She goes, anybody who comes, we help. Yeah, they're Muslim. Yes, they're gay. They're lesbian. They're transgender. Anyone who walks through this door, we love them. Jesus loves them. And she has this feeling that the Christian community doesn't accept that, right? We kind of do this before we talk to people, before we accept them. And it was really hard for these people because they're so deeply involved in this refugee community, and they feel like there's not an understanding. So in a sense, it reminds me of this. They're calling from the highest place. Come, listen. Come, meet these people. Come, you know. And so this was really an interesting struggle that they were having, that they just wanted to talk about, you know, because their friends and loved ones were important to them, and they wanted them to understand. So I kind of get this sense here. I'm calling to you guys. I want you to understand. So, verse 4, whoever is simple, now this is woman saying, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. A simple person is someone who's not learned yet. They're gullible. They're gullible, not because they're dumb or whatever. They're just gullible because they're uncommitted. Nobody's shown them the path yet, so they're walking. But they would be just walking straight, and she's like, you know, come to my house. Okay, let me love you. And then to him who lacks sense, this person is not gullible just because they're gullible. This is a person who is someone who's in danger of being a fool because they know the right thing to do, but they don't do it. So woman wisdom extends not only to the gullible because you don't know any better, but to the fools who, you know, almost fools, I suppose, who there's a chance for them to be redeemed and turn around. All right. And she says, you know, turn from your path, come into my house. And this is the idea that we turn away from our wandering. We turn away from what was on that path. A lot of times when we see somebody going down the wrong path, especially young people, one of the things we want them to turn away from are the companions that they have on that path. You know? What is the one about, is it bad character? Something about the company. Do you guys remember that one?
Yeah, something corrupting. Bad character.
Corrupts good behavior or something, or bad. Anyway, there's scripture. It just came to my mind. But we know, especially as parents, we realize the people we hang out with have a huge influence on our life. Huge, right? Sometimes we see kids turn just because of who they're hanging out with, right? And that's a hard thing for a Christian because we say love all people, but don't hang out with this person, you know. And I remember Jim and I having to be very, you know, I guess wise. We tried to be wise. I don't know if we were, but, you know, saying, you know, Jesus wants us to love everybody, but not be influenced by everybody. You can love them, but we want you to influence that person, not be influenced by what, you know, some of the things they're doing. So that's a hard thing with parents. How do you tell your kids to love people, but stay away from this person, in a sense, right?
It's don't be misled.
Oh.
Bad company corrupts good character.
Don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. That is true. And so the woman wisdom is calling to our youth, calling to us. And like I said, it's not so much maybe as we get older, although sometimes it is, but for our young people, you know, especially in this day of extreme relativity, you know, I'm okay, you're okay, it's okay to hang out with whoever, Mom, you know, they don't know the danger. But she's saying turn aside from that path, and even those on that path. Okay. And it's really cool. She's like, turn away from the unrighteous, but be a guest at my table. Be a worthy guest. Let me serve you. And she says here in verse 5, come eat my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. There's the wine again. Come eat my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Okay. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. Again, turn aside the path. Turn aside from your path. Insight, understanding of God, that is where we find wisdom and peace. Wisdom wants us to have insight into how the world works, the spiritual world and the physical world. Now, we leave this for just a second, and we come into this it's really actually a cool part. It says, verses 8 to 12, we have this little aside. Some people think this was added later to the text, but some people think it was a part of the original text. I don't know, because it is kind of a strange group, and it goes like this. Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Instruct a wise man, and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man, and he will add to his learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through me your days will be many. This is wisdom. Through me your days will be many, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise, your wisdom will reward you, If you are a mocker, you alone will suffer. Okay, so this is the little interim part here. Let me read something from Waltke, you guys. This was so powerful to me. I don't generally like reading stuff, but this was so powerful to me. I'm sure you guys know people. You've probably met people like this. This is so powerful. So listen to what he says that woman wisdom is saying in this part. He says, the word apostate, you guys, is somebody who renounces God, okay? We're talking about hardcore renouncing God, okay? We're not talking about the simple, the gullible. We're talking about, I've renounced God, okay? The most hardened apostates are the mockers. And some of your versions will say scoffers, okay? He says, the most hardened apostates are the mockers, okay? So listen to this. The mocker is the antithesis, the opposite. The mocker is the antithesis of the wise, the antithesis of a discerning person. So a mocker does not truly discern, okay? Even though they look like they might. So the mocker is the antithesis of the wise and discerning person whom he hates. He associates with fools. The mocker associates with the gullible, the proud, and the arrogant. In fact, the spiritual root of his problem is his overwhelming pride, which blocks him from all wisdom. We know that we have to guard our pride, like, vigilantly, right? Because all of us have it. We all tend to go there. And he says, the spiritual root of his problem is overwhelming pride, and it blocks wisdom. Our pride blocks wisdom. And he goes on to say that the mocker, listen to this, this is amazing. I like his language. He has a genius for invective, and I had to look up invective. Invective is abusive speech. The mocker has a genius for invective and denigration. He opens his big mouth, he says, that's funny. He opens his big mouth and unleashing the tensions and the strains in a community, he sets the whole community at loggerheads and he destroys it. No man earns more universal detestation or deserves it more than he who wears a perpetual sneer. So he's like, no one should be detested more than the person who wears a perpetual sneer, who is himself incapable of deep loyalty. He's incapable of reverence. Man, if you've ever met someone who's incapable of reverence, that's kind of the person we're talking about. And this person supposes it is his mission in life to promote the corrosion of the values by which individuals and society lives. I mean, I have known people like this. I am going to corrupt the values because I want to say everything's okay. And I mean, people who are very anti-Christian sometimes come out like this, right? They're not just anti-Christian in themselves, they want to destroy your values too. And I remember what Jesus said in Matthew 7:6, kind of really a strong statement. It sounds awful, but it's true. Jesus said, do not give dogs what is sacred, right? Woman wisdom is saying, we can only deal with people who want to be educated. We can only deal with people who want to learn. We can't deal with people who are shoving all this back and shoving everything in your face. Jesus says, don't give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. Because if you do, they may trample them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. This is what the mocker does. He wants to destroy you, your values, everything you're about. And we could sit there until we're blue in the face, being kind and loving. And let me tell you about what Jesus said. It's so amazing. Let me tell you about wisdom. And, for nothing. It's like throwing your pearls to a pig. Kind of an ugly thought. So then Woman Wisdom says, whoever corrects a scoffer or a mocker, if you try to correct these people, you'll get yourself abused. If you try to reprove or correct a wicked man, you will incur injury on yourself. Okay? A mocker is so arrogant. Mockers are so contemptuous about others, they never will submit to anyone's teachings. And that will include God's. If you know someone who won't submit to anyone's teachings on earth, they're certainly not going to submit to God's teachings. Okay? And here's another one. This one is so accurate for me anyway. When his anger has been stirred, the mocker, when his anger is stirred, he will publicly shame you and humiliate you or the people around you, or the wise. When they are angry, they will publicly shame and humiliate. And she says, don't reprove, don't correct a scoffer, he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, he will love you. Again, we're urged not to spend time on those who will not be educated. He called it uneducable. Uneducable, you're uneducable. You cannot be educated, okay? And it says, those whose passions erupt in a negative, passionate response of hate. Okay. But we are to concentrate on those who have the capability of establishing true, loyal, spiritual relationships. That's who we concentrate on. Okay. And it's not to say that these people who hate, these mockers, it's not to say they can't turn and become that person who can be educated. It's not to say that we give up all hope or, we hate them forever. I mean, it's not to say that. We don't hate them. We pray for them. But there's a lot of people out there who need to hear what we have to say. And we can't, you guys, it's like our professor, I think Marissa says this too, we say this. There's a lot of books in the world. Be careful which ones you read, because you can't read all of them. So make sure you read the good ones or whatever. The ones, it's kind of like that with us. There's a lot of people in our world, Graham, Puyallup, wherever we live, there's a lot of people in our world who need to hear what we have to say, and they need our time, and they need our energy. But we can't waste it on people who don't care and they don't want to learn. We just can't. We can't until they're ready. And then Yeah.
Are you going to cover in the application how we discern who those people are?
No.
I was hoping you had something cool there. Something cool. I'm sorry.
I think actually, the hardcore ones are easy. I have some family members that are hardcore. They're kind of easy to identify because they mock everything you say. They're, somebody with a soft heart, they want to learn. I mean, it's pretty easy. You can tell, because you guys have had conversations with people that they're not even listening to what you're saying. They're crafting their response in their head, and they're not listening. They're not absorbing. And we've been that person too. I've been that person many times. I'm like, I don't think I care what this person's saying. I just want to win. But I think the people who are, they're pretty, some ways, easy to spot because they're not defensive. They're not. They might get passionate about something that they don't understand about God, or maybe they're mad about God. It's not, that's okay. You can ask any question. God can handle the questions. It's kind of where the heart is, though, when they come from. But, yeah, I tried to, convert a family member when I was a young Christian, and it was going nowhere. And I just got abused, and, which is probably my fault. I don't think I was real gentle and wise either how I was doing it. But, yeah, I think you'll know them by their fruit. Maybe not always, but okay. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be wiser still. Notice that if we are wise, all of our lives we continue to receive instruction, and it continues to help us. So, like the moment somebody tells you something and you don't want to receive instruction, especially if they're godly, especially if you've known they've been good to you. As soon as we want to stop receiving instruction, and I have a little bell that goes off. It doesn't mean I always do the right thing, but the bell is there. Gosh, Jody, you're being arrogant, which blocks your wisdom, or you're not receiving instruction because you're too angry or too hurt. But when you guys stop receiving instruction, something should go off in your head because we want to be wise, and that is so hard to do, especially when someone tells you something that's so basic part of your personality, but it's a bad part, like me being bossy. When someone tells you something that's to be true, but it's painful, and you were hoping you were hiding it, but you're not hiding anything. It's funny. The one thing I think we think we're hiding, the deepest part of us, everybody knows, right? I talk too much. Wow, everybody knows that. I'm not really hiding that, right? So, we need to be careful when we're receiving instruction, and be careful who you're receiving it from too. But all right. The fear or awe of the Lord, this kind of fear is like, he's awesome. Like, I just continually, as I get older, I'm just like, God is so awesome. And the older I get, the more like this building thing could be really frustrating, right? This building thing, I'm like, are you serious? But I have this deep sense that God is in this with us. We have to listen. I just feel like I have this awe of him and what he's doing. So the fear that we have, this awe of the Lord, the awe, is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is insight. He's holy. He's other. He's separated from us in great holiness. So he's our source of wisdom. Our most important education begins with submission to the highest authority. And this one's a little hard in our culture. I was telling, Russ and I were talking about, I'm extremely egalitarian, right? I live in an egalitarian culture, and then I'm an egalitarian on top of that. I'm extremely egalitarian. So it's hard for me to see hierarchy, but I think that's kind of our world today too. I think for our kids, this generation, I mean, it's hard to see any hierarchy, but our wisdom starts with submitting to God. And I'm not very good at submitting to anyone, so that makes it difficult sometimes to submit to God. And I don't know how we practice this as a society. How do we teach our children there's some sort of submission that we live under? Hopefully to us as parents, and hopefully that transfers to God. But that's just something to think about, because our wisdom begins with our absolute submission to God. And we're not very good at that. At least I'm not all the time. So. For by me your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life. And again, this is all things being equal. I know there could be, Brenda was, in fact, we need to pray for that. Brenda, on her last shift before she came here, was involved. There was a car accident and the mother died, and the 14-year-old daughter is in critical condition. So, and they might have been very wise people. So we're not saying every time you have wisdom you will, again, this is the nature of the genre of Proverbs. If all the world worked as it should, wisdom would make you live longer. Okay. And if you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you will bear it alone. In other words, think about these two women, and the author is saying, if you choose woman wisdom, you will be the primary beneficiary of what she has to give. But if you choose woman folly, you will be the primary beneficiary of what she has to give. Whatever you take takes you. So this is the personal responsibility of what you choose. All right, and finally, the very last part, the woman folly is loud. Now imagine this woman. Okay, if you guys have ever been to, some of you, if you went to college, but even if you didn't, you know what I'm talking about. Imagine the most raucous, awful fraternity party. You could, I'm trying to remember people who were like this, loud, obnoxious, crude. One time, Jim and I might have even told you this story because it was so crazy to me. He worked in this big international benefits consulting company in Houston, and we had a Christmas party at this wealthy person's house, and it's Houston, so everybody has a pool, and it was a big yard. It was really nice, we're having this, and everybody's dressed up. I mean, and you're in Houston, you're in the South, so the women have hose on and heels and dresses, and then as the night goes on, there was a lot of unmixed wine being served and beer, there was a lot of, and next thing I know, these women who were dignified when they came in their dress and throwing off their heels, their hose on, they're on the slide going down to the pool. I mean, this thing got crazy, and they were so drunk. I'm like, this is the kind of thing I'm like, what are they going to say in the morning? Like when they go back to work Monday morning, I mean, you guys, because we were just like, this is really embarrassing. I mean, you guys have seen people that drunk before, but maybe you've been that person that drunk before. But think about the return. Just think about this. This is the scene. I mean, this lady is like this. The woman folly, it says she's loud, she's undisciplined, she's without knowledge. She sits at the door of her house, and on the seat of the highest point of the city, she's trying to mimic woman wisdom. Okay. And she calls out to those who pass by. Again, she's doing just what woman wisdom does. She wants to pretend she's her. And listen to this, says she's verse 15. She's calling to people passing by, and they're going straight. These are the people who are on the right path right now, right? But she's calling them, turn aside to me. Let all who are simple come in here. See? She says, those who lack judgment. And then verse 17, you can see her character. She goes, stolen water is sweet. And if you guys remember, another extended metaphor through Proverbs, water stands for the sexuality of this. Stolen water is sweet. Right? Stolen water. But not forever, right? Food eaten in secret is delicious. This is her character. Be secretive. And you know what? When you were young and when I was young, maybe I was like this, everything that was kind of secret and in the dark was very exciting to me, tantalizing. I want to know, you're a young kid, you want to know what's out there, because they're telling you, don't go there. And then but it's alluring, isn't it? For our young people, it's alluring. She goes, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know, and this is wisdom again, little do they know, the people who are turning aside to her, little do they know that the dead are there. And her guests are in the depths of the grave. I called Josh. I forgot he wasn't going to be here today. I had this funny request. I'm like, hey, do you know the song Hotel California? He goes, yeah. I go, maybe I want you to sing it. He goes, why would I do that? Why would I ever sing that? But Hotel California, for those of you who are not even born then, it's 1977. It was from the hit album from the Eagles, won a Grammy. The song is about a loss of innocence. And I got on Wikipedia and started reading about it. I was like, I really didn't know what the song was about, but it did come to mind. And the last part of the song, so they talked about, this was the Eagles. They were a young band, and none of them were from California. And California was like what do you guys call it? Is that what you do in school? Oh, California was that, the dream. And they drove into California.
Especially if you're from Ohio.
Yeah, especially. Well, anything's a dream if you're from
Well, I
Ohio.
don't like it that much sometimes.
So the Eagles are driving in and they're young, and there was the Beverly Hills Hotel there, and that was like, it became a symbol to them. I mean, it was, you made it. You're in California, the lights and the scene, and then the debauchery, and then, you can imagine what musicians get themselves into. And anyway, talks about, you get into this, and then you can't really ever go back. Once your innocence is lost, it's lost, right? And that doesn't mean that we can't be redeemed. Jesus came to earth so that we could be redeemed from these things. And he says, the last part of the line says, last thing I remember, you guys know, now you're going to be singing this, and I've been singing this all day in my head. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you want, but you may never leave. So that was kind of that loss of innocence. Once you lose it, it's gone. But in Jesus, not really, right? In Jesus, we can be restored. That's our hope. So I just thought about that, and I guess one more thing I'd like to say is something else about our time at World Relief. Because I was trying to think about wisdom in general here. Yeah, it was really interesting. Of the 6 people who worked there, just talking, it was what a privilege to talk to people. Just, what do you do here? And they're all Christians too, which is just super cool, right? What do you do here? What are your struggles? What's the stress of your job? What's the hardest thing that you deal with? And I was glad we had been studying Proverbs. I think that Jim and I, hopefully were able to give them a little wisdom. And I liked it that we could connect it to the Bible, connect it to Christ. And they were very, very good listeners too, weren't they? They were really listening hard. But I took time yesterday to reflect on what we had talked to them about, and I found some common themes, particularly with the young men. And one of the common themes that I realized was that wisdom takes self-restraint a lot of times. That's what's hard to teach our young kids, because they're full of energy, right? We want them to be full of energy. They're full of vigor. And when you're excited and full of life, that's when it's hardest to be restrained. One young man, these guys were in their 20s. I think they're very young. I could call them kids, but obviously they're not kids. But one young man was saying that it was kind of interesting. He goes, I know this is small. I know this is nothing, but I've never posted anything on Facebook, and I'm thinking it's about time. And he goes, and I know it's not right, but I just want to blast some people out there, right? I mean, he's angry. He's angry at how so much false news is being portrayed about the refugee situation. And he's like, I just want to blast people with it. And so he goes, I know it's not Christ-like, I know, but I still want to do it. And he was being very tempted, right? By woman folly, you could say. She's like, turn aside to me. Turn aside. You have a good reason to do it. Turn aside to me. And And it was interesting, from one of the lessons, one of the commentator that I was reading, I think I told you guys this at the time, there was this cool quote, and the commentator said, it's hard to be right and not hurt somebody with it. So I told him, this is something I read, it might be helpful to you, and it said, it's hard to be right and not hurt somebody with it. And he's like, whoa, okay, I got it, right? And so basically saying that this kind of thing requires self-restraint. Wisdom requires a lot of self-restraint, which is, you can imagine, very difficult for me. And then another young man came in, and he was very troubled about what the next step in his career. He's 29 years old. His internal clock is ticking. It's kind of interesting. Women sometimes have an internal clock that ticks. I gotta have an 80. So his internal clock was ticking. He's like, I'm 29 years old. Someday I want to marry. I want to have kids. I want to be established. I don't think, don't make a lot of money here. I don't know what my next, and you could just feel this burden on it. And he's like, and I look around at my peers, they all have higher degrees than I do. They're making more money. Like, he's looking at them going, oh, they're established, right? And so he said, I kind of related to him, and we talked about that sometimes when we're not self-restrained, we want something right now. We have a big club. I looked at it as this big club, and we're beating down the door that we want to beat down. And I said, it seems like, I relate to you, because it seems like you got this big club in your hand, and you're going to every door, and you're going to beat it to death, and you're going to peek through to see if this is the right way to go. And that's not the right way. He's going to beat down another door. And I said, but there's one door, with just a touch of your finger, it will open. Because I feel like that's the path that God will have for you. And I said to him, do you remember, I said, you know the verse. Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And he started crying. Because we forget, right? We forget about wisdom. We go first with a big club in our hand, and we forget to wait. And when we wait for God, our yoke is easy. So that's kind of what I got out of this, just generally about wisdom today. So do you guys have any questions or thoughts?